He said, "I'm busy that day." Just like that. No hesitation, no guilt, just a pause long enough for me to feel stupid for even asking. I stood there, with the phone pressed to my ear, waiting for something else, an excuse, a reason, maybe even a lie. But all I got was the hum of the line before he said, "You'll manage without me, Jenny. You always do." I swallowed hard, the kind of swallow that burns all the way down. My voice came out quieter than I meant. "It's my wedding, Dad. You're not even going to walk me down the aisle." He sighed like I was bothering him. "Don't make this emotional. I've got commitments that weekend. You know how it is." I didn't. I never did. The click of the call ending felt heavier than any door slamming. I kept staring at my phone screen until it dimmed and turned black, reflecting my own face back at me, small and tired. That's when I realized it wasn't surprise I felt. It was recognition. My father had always been this way. Always busy when it mattered, always absent when it counted. My name is Jenny William. I'm 32 years old, and I teach English at a small public school in Vermont. And for as long as I can remember, I've been the quiet one in a family that never learned how to listen. I still remember graduation day, the chairs lined up under the tent, the sound of names echoing through the speakers. I looked for him in the crowd. He wasn't there. Mom had smiled, said he got caught at work. But even back then, I knew work was just another name for choice. At my mother's funeral, he stood 2 feet away, speaking softly to everyone but me. At my sister Emily's wedding, he smiled like he was proud of her, like she was the only daughter worth loving. It's strange how you learn to make peace with being invisible. You start shrinking your voice, trimming your needs, learning to celebrate alone. Still, when I got engaged, I thought just maybe he'd see me differently, that this time I'd be someone to show up for. Instead, I got, "I'm busy that day." I sat down on the couch, the same couch I grew up on, faded floral cushions and all. The living room still smelled faintly of old coffee and furniture polish. The family portraits stared back at me, Dad, Mom, Emily, and somewhere on the edge, me. Always a little out of focus. For a few minutes, I tried to convince myself he didn't mean it that way. Maybe something important came up. Maybe he was just too proud to say he was nervous. But the truth crawled up my throat before I could stop it. He didn't care. Not enough. Not anymore. Maybe not ever. I thought about calling him back, but what would I even say? Begging for a place in your own family is its own kind of humiliation. I'd done enough of that growing up. So instead, I opened my window and let the cold Vermont air in. It hurt a little, but it made me feel awake. I don't know why I still expect him to change. Maybe every child keeps a corner of hope alive, even when they should have buried it years ago. Maybe it's just habit. But I think it's also fear. Fear that if I stop hoping, then it really means I was never loved the way I thought. Sometimes I wonder how many of us live like that, waiting for someone to see us, to finally say, "I'm proud of you," or "I'll be there." Maybe that's why stories like mine matter, because someone out there knows exactly how it feels when family treats you like you're invisible. If you do, stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. I sat there, staring at my wedding dress hanging by the window, white lace, soft light. It should have felt beautiful, but it didn't. It just felt empty. I imagined walking down that aisle alone, everyone whispering, wondering why. The thought made my stomach twist. Then I realized something. I wasn't afraid of walking alone. I was afraid of how much it would hurt to pretend it didn't bother me. I thought of Mom again, how she used to hold my hand and whisper, "Don't take after him, Jenny. Don't let love become something you have to earn." I used to think she meant relationships. Now I think she meant family. The day faded into evening. I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat there, tracing the edge of the phone in my hand, listening to the quiet. It's strange. Silence can feel heavier than words. I didn't cry. I thought I would, but I didn't. I think I've already cried every tear he'll ever deserve. All that was left was this hollow space inside me, And somewhere deep in that space, a tiny spark of something else. Anger, maybe, or clarity. I finally stood up, set the phone on the table, and whispered, "All right, Dad, I'll manage." My voice didn't shake this time. It was calm, final. Just as I turned to close the window, my phone lit up again. I almost didn't look, but then I saw the name flash across the screen. Emily, my sister. Her tone, when I picked up, was too bright to be kind. And somehow, I already knew this conversation wasn't going to make anything better. Her voice was too bright when she said it. "So, Dad's coming with us to Napa next weekend. We're finalizing the menu for my vow renewal. He even booked the venue himself." I held the phone tighter and tried to sound normal. "That's nice, Emily." She laughed in that way she always does when she knows she's winning something I'm not. "You should see the car he's gifting me, Jen. A white Lexus. Said it's for being such a good daughter. He's so thoughtful, isn't he?" I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood. "He's always been thoughtful with you," I said softly. She ignored the edge in my voice. "Oh, and guess what? He's helping David expand his business. Said it's a smart investment. You know, Dad, he only bets on success." I looked out the window. The late afternoon light hit the trees outside my classroom, soft and golden. But it didn't feel warm. "He must be proud of you," I said. "Of course he is," she answered quickly. "He should be." There was a pause, one of those quiet ones where everything unspoken becomes loud. Then she added, "Don't take it personally, Jen. You've always been too sensitive. Dad just has priorities." Her words landed like cold water on my chest. I almost laughed. Sensitive. That was her word for me since we were kids. Sensitive when I cried after Mom's funeral. Sensitive when Dad forgot my birthday. Sensitive when she got her third raise and I didn't tell anyone mine was cut. It wasn't sensitivity. It was memory. I just didn't forget the way people made me feel. I stared at the chipped paint on the window ledge. "Right," I said. "Priorities." She kept talking about dresses and photographers, about how Dad said she looked like Mom when she smiled. I let her words run through me like static. When she was done, she ended with, "You're invited, of course. Don't feel awkward if he's busy with us. It's just how things are." Then she hung up before I could answer. For a minute, I just sat there listening to the silence. I could hear my own breathing, slow and shallow. The clock ticked softly in the background, the sound of something constant in a life that wasn't. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. My mind went to the house we grew up in. Dad's voice always louder when Emily was in the room, his eyes always softer when she spoke. I used to think if I got better grades, he'd notice me. When that didn't work, I tried being quieter, calmer, easier to love. But in that house, affection wasn't free. It was something you earned by being useful, obedient, or beautiful in the right way. Emily was all three. I remember one Christmas when I was 12. He gave her a gold bracelet and handed me an envelope with a $20 bill. "You're practical, Jen," he'd said. "You'll use it better." I'd smiled like it didn't matter, but it stayed with me. Even now as an adult, it's like those roles never changed. I'm still the one who listens. She's still the one who gets celebrated. Maybe it's my fault for staying close, for calling, for caring. But love is strange. It makes you reach for people who've already let go. I thought about my upcoming wedding, how I'd told Emily first, hoping she'd sound happy for me. Instead, she'd said, "Oh, wow, that's great. When's the date?" Like she was reading from a script. Now, hearing her brag about vow renewals and cars, I realized she didn't call to share joy. She called to remind me of where I stood. The worst part was how practiced it sounded. Cruelty delivered gently, so it could never be called cruelty. I stood up and walked to the mirror near my desk. My reflection looked calm, almost detached. Maybe that's what happens when disappointment becomes routine. You stop reacting. You just absorb it. I whispered to myself, "You're fine, Jenny. You always are." But even as I said it, something inside me pushed back. No, I wasn't fine. I was tired. Tired of pretending that being forgotten didn't hurt. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stared at the sunlight spilling through the curtains. It felt like standing in a life that kept shrinking around me, one polite rejection at a time. Growing up under the same roof as Emily was like learning to disappear gracefully. She was the favorite, the reflection of everything my father valued. I was the reminder of everything he overlooked. His affection had always been currency, traded for obedience, for resemblance, for making his life easier, and I never quite fit the price. I thought about calling him, asking why he did it, why I was never enough. But I already knew the answer. Some people can't love without conditions, and some of us spend our lives mistaking that for family. The air felt heavy as the sun dipped behind the trees. I picked up my phone again, staring at her name in the recent calls list. My thumb hovered over it before I locked the screen and set it down. There was nothing left to say. A strange calm settled over me. Not peace, just the absence of shock. I finally whispered, "I wonder what it takes to stop wanting his love." The words sounded foreign, but honest. Just then, my phone buzzed again. A new message. It was from Mark. "Don't worry about him. We'll make our own family." I stared at his words until they blurred a little. Maybe he was right. Maybe that was the only way to move forward. I exhaled slowly, a quiet promise forming somewhere deep inside me. Whatever came next, it would be mine. The engagement was small, just how I wanted. No fireworks, no speeches, no crowd. Mark slipped the ring onto my finger in the quiet corner of a garden cafe, the sound of rain tapping on the window behind us. He smiled at me like I was enough, like he didn't need the world to see it. For a moment, I almost believed that was all I needed too. Then the silence crept in, the kind that reminds you who isn't there. Dad wasn't. Emily wasn't. It wasn't even a surprise anymore. It was just another empty seat with their names on it. When Mark kissed my forehead and said, "We'll celebrate properly when everyone's free," I nodded, pretending that everyone meant more than it did. Back at the school, my colleagues tried to make it feel special. Mrs. Carter brought cupcakes, pink frosting with plastic rings on top. "You deserve this, sweetheart," she said, handing me one like it could fill the space my father left behind. I smiled, thanked her, and went back to grading essays. I told myself not to check my phone for his message. I did anyway. Nothing. That night, I drafted the wedding invitations. The guest list was short, just a handful of friends, Mark's parents, and out of habit, I wrote my father's name. Emily's, too. I stared at the envelope for a long time before sealing it. I didn't expect much, but I wanted to know that I'd at least tried, that I wasn't the one who gave up first. A few days later, my phone buzzed. The message came from Dad's number. 2 words. "I can't." No explanation, no apology, not even a greeting. Just that. I read it 3 times, waiting for something else to follow. It didn't. Mark found me sitting on the couch, the phone still in my hand. "Bad day?" he asked. I nodded. "He said he can't come." Mark frowned. "Can't or won't?" I shrugged. "What's the difference?" He sat beside me, his hand resting on mine. "Then forget it. We don't need him. We could just elope, you know. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere no one can hurt you again." The idea sounded peaceful, but also cowardly. I shook my head. "No, I want a ceremony. Not for photos or guests. I just want it to be real." I paused, my voice quieter. "I need to stand there and know I made it here without him." Mark didn't argue. He just kissed my hand and said, "Then we'll do it your way." I tried to focus on the good things, the ring, the man I loved, the life we were about to build. But even happiness felt heavy when you're the only one clapping for yourself. Each night I told myself it wasn't about my father, that I wasn't that little girl waiting by the window anymore. But deep down, I still was. The following weekend, I went to visit my dad's house to drop off the printed invitation. His car was in the driveway. I almost turned around, but some part of me still wanted to see him, even if it hurt. I knocked. He opened the door halfway. "Jenny," he said, like the word tasted bitter. I held out the envelope. "It's for the wedding. I thought maybe—" He interrupted. "I got the message. You didn't have to come all this way." His tone was flat, polite, in a way that kept me at a distance. I swallowed and tried to keep my voice steady. I wanted to give it to you myself. He nodded, but didn't take it. Leave it on the table. I'll look at it later. So I did. The kitchen looked the same wooden table, same coffee cup stains from years ago. I left the envelope there and walked toward the door. Before I stepped out, I heard him mumble something under his breath. I turned. What did you say? He sighed. You'll be fine without me, Jenny. You always are. The words hit harder than I expected, not because they were cruel, but because they were true. He believed that. Maybe I did too. Driving home, I didn't cry. I just stared at the road, the gray sky pressing down like it wanted to say what he never could. I realized then that this ache I carried wasn't fresh. It was old, recycled, familiar. I'd been living with it for years, mistaking it for love. When I got home, Mark was waiting on the porch, his arms crossed against the cold. You okay? He asked. I nodded, though my throat ached. He's not coming, I said. Did he at least say why? I smiled faintly. Because I'll be fine without him. Mark didn't know what to say. He just pulled me into his arms, and for once, I let myself lean into someone who actually showed up. But even in that warmth, part of me stayed somewhere else, back in that kitchen, next to the envelope he'd probably thrown away by now. Later that night, when Mark fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and whispered, It's not about him. I wanted it to sound true. It didn't. The florist asked if I wanted to add another flower to the bouquet, something brighter. I told her no. I'd already decided to keep it simple. White roses, a few sprigs of baby's breath, and my mother's locket tied around the ribbon. It was the only thing that made it feel like someone from my family would be there. I ran my thumb over the locket when she wasn't looking and whispered to myself, At least you'll walk me down the aisle. Mark was kind, the kind of man who noticed the silence more than the noise. He watched me tie the ribbon and asked softly, You sure you're okay? I nodded. Just nervous, I said. But he didn't believe it. He didn't push either. That's what I loved about him. He gave space where others took it. In the days leading up to the rehearsal, I tried to fill the emptiness with small gestures. I rewrote my vows twice, each version softer than the last. I mentioned forgiveness in both, as if saying it out loud could make it real. Every time I practiced, I caught myself glancing at the empty space beside me, where my father should have been standing. It was strange how absence could take up more room than presence ever did. When the rehearsal day finally came, the weather was perfect. Blue skies, soft wind, the kind that should have made everything feel right. I stood at the end of the aisle, bouquet in hand, watching people laugh and find their places. Mark's parents were warm and welcoming. My colleagues from school waved, cheerful and supportive. But there was still that one chair, front row, left side, marked with his name. I told the planner not to remove it. I didn't want anyone else sitting there. As the music started, I walked slowly, timing my steps with the beat, counting them under my breath. 1, 2, 3. Smile. 1, 2, 3. Pretend you're fine. The officiant smiled back at me, but his eyes lingered on the empty seat. I saw pity there. I hated that. After the practice ended, one of the guests patted my shoulder. Your father will come tomorrow, she said kindly. He just needs time. I smiled, the kind of smile you practice in mirrors. Maybe, I said, even though I knew he wouldn't. Back home, I placed the bouquet carefully in a glass vase, next to the invitation he never replied to. The silence in the room pressed on me like weight. Mark came in later with dinner and tried to lighten the mood. We're almost there, he said, setting the food down. One more night. I forced a smile. I know. When he stepped into the other room, I opened my laptop to check my emails, even though I knew there'd be nothing. There it was. Nothing. Not from him, not from Emily. Just a few school notifications and a delivery reminder. I closed the lid and sat back. The house smelled faintly of lilies from the bouquet. My mother had loved lilies. Dad said they reminded him of funerals. Maybe that's why I chose them. I looked around at the decorations, soft lights, small details, all things meant to bring joy. They did, in theory. But joy doesn't sit well when your heart still waits for something it knows won't come. Later that night, I heard Mark moving in the kitchen. I stayed quiet in the living room, lost in thought. Every sound reminded me of how temporary everything felt. I wondered what kind of father leaves his daughter standing alone on the day she practices her wedding walk. Maybe the same kind who skips her graduations. The same kind who shows up only to say the wrong thing. I tried to convince myself that this was closure, that showing up for myself was enough. But part of me still wanted one call, one apology, even if it was half-hearted. That's the cruel thing about hope. It survives long after reason does. When the clock hit 11, my phone buzzed. A message alert. My chest tightened. For a second, I thought maybe, finally, it was him. I opened it. It wasn't a message. It was a notification from my bank. A new deposit. $100. The sender's note read, "For your future. Dad." I stared at it until the numbers blurred. No call. No message. Just a transaction. As if affection could be itemized. I whispered to myself, he really thinks that's enough. The ache in my chest felt old, familiar, inherited. Mark came back and saw me still holding my phone. "Everything all right?" he asked. I nodded automatically. "Yeah, just a message from Dad." He smiled, unaware. "Oh, that's good." "What did he say?" I looked down at the screen one last time and locked it. "Nothing that matters," I said quietly. I placed the phone face down and stared out the window. The street was empty, just one porch light flickering at the house across from ours. It was strange how life could look so peaceful while something inside you burned quietly. I told myself I was done expecting anything from him. But as I sat there, fingers brushing the edge of my mother's locket, I knew that wasn't true. It was past midnight when I finally sat down. The lights were off, but I didn't need them. The glow from the street lamp outside was enough to catch the small white slip of paper on the table. The check. $100. For your future, Dad. I kept reading that line over and over until it stopped feeling like words and started feeling like noise. I turned it over in my hand. It still smelled faintly like his, cologne, the same one he'd wear to church, to dinner, to every event he showed up for someone else's daughter. It's strange how money can feel heavier than it looks, like it's carrying everything unspoken between two people. I whispered, "Even his love has a price tag." I placed the check flat on the table and just stared at it. My hands felt cold. It wasn't about the amount. It never was. It was about what it meant, that affection was something I was supposed to buy or earn or prove I deserved. I thought of every moment I tried to win it, every good grade, every smile I practiced in the mirror, every time I told myself he'd come around. And here it was, all that effort, worth $100. The quiet felt too loud. I got up, walked to the window, and looked out at the street. The air was still. Somewhere in another house, someone's father was probably asleep after kissing his daughter goodnight. Mine was probably asleep too, dreaming about how generous he'd been. I went back to the table, sat down, and picked up the check again. The edges were smooth, almost fragile. I folded it once, then again, until it fit between my fingers. Then I tore it, slowly. Each rip sounded like something breaking loose inside me. I didn't stop until it was nothing but paper dust in my palm. I expected to feel angry. I didn't. I felt light, empty, but in a clean way, like something had finally been cleared out. Maybe that's what clarity feels like when it first arrives. Quiet, steady, irreversible. I brushed the torn pieces into the trash and whispered, "I'm done begging." For the first time in a long while, I believed myself. I wasn't going to keep reaching for people who kept pulling away. I wasn't going to build my worth out of their absence. It was strange how one act of letting go could feel like breathing for the first time. I sat there for a while, letting the silence settle. The lamp outside flickered. My reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, stronger. Somehow, I realized I'd spent so much of my life trying to be enough for him that I'd forgotten how to be enough for me. I opened my notebook. My vows were already written, neat and practiced, the way I thought they should sound. But as I read them, they felt hollow, like I'd written them for someone else's story. I crossed out every line that mentioned family, every word that tried to sound forgiving before I'd even healed. Then I started again. This time I wrote about choice, about building peace with your own hands when no one offers it to you, about walking down the aisle not as someone's daughter, but as someone who learned how to stand on her own. The pen moved slower than usual, but it felt right. Each word sounded more like truth and less like apology. Mark had always told me I had a calm kind of strength. I never saw it before now. I used to think strength looked like winning arguments or proving people wrong. But maybe it looks like this, sitting in the dark, tearing the last thing that hurt you, and not needing anyone to see it happen. I leaned back in the chair, reading the vows under the dim light. They weren't perfect, but they were mine. And for the first time, that was enough. I caught myself whispering, "Do you ever reach that point where silence hurts less than trying again? Tell me if you've been there." I wasn't really asking anyone, but it felt good to say it out loud, like maybe someone out there would understand. The sound of footsteps pulled me back. Mark appeared in the doorway, his hair messy, eyes half asleep. "You're still up?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Just writing." He stepped closer, noticed the small scraps of paper in the trash, and tilted his head. "What's that?" "Nothing important," I said. He looked at me for a long moment, then smiled in that quiet, knowing way. "You ready to do something about it?" I didn't answer right away. I just met his eyes and felt something shift. A calm certainty, like the start of a new chapter I didn't have to earn. Mark leaned against the counter, watching me tear another page from my wedding planner. "You're really doing this," he said quietly. I didn't look up. "I'm not canceling the date," I said, my voice steady. "I'm just changing the story." The paper crumpled in my hand, felt like everything I'd been holding on to for too long. He walked closer. "No more fancy venues?" I shook my head. No more empty chairs pretending to mean something. It was strange how calm I felt. After weeks of sadness, something inside me had gone still, like a lake after a storm. The quiet wasn't peace yet, but it was close. "Then where do you want to do it?" he asked. I thought for a moment before answering. "The old town hall, the one near the library." He smiled. "Simple." I nodded. "Real." That night, I started writing new invitations by hand. Just a few names, each one chosen carefully. People who actually stood by me when it mattered. I called my old literature professor, the one who used to tell me my essays had heart. She sounded surprised. "You're getting married?" she asked. "Yes," I said softly. "And I'd really like you there." She promised she would come. Then I called Mrs. Cole, my childhood neighbor. She was 82 now, but still sharp as ever. "You want me at your wedding?" she said, half laughing. "Of course. You're the one who taught me how to braid my hair and bake cookies." She went quiet for a moment before saying, "Your mother would be proud, sweetheart." I swallowed hard. "I hope so." The last call was to the local librarian, Mrs. Daniels. She'd known my mother well. When I told her, she said, "Your mom used to talk about this day. She said you'd grow into your own calm strength one day." I smiled through tears I didn't expect. Maybe she was right. When I hung up, Mark was sitting on the floor, sorting through boxes of decorations. "You know," he said, holding up a string of lights, "this doesn't feel like a wedding anymore. It feels like something else." I raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" He smiled. "Like you reclaiming your story." I laughed softly. "Maybe it's about time." For the first time, I didn't feel small when I thought of my father. I didn't feel that ache to prove something. I just felt ready. Mark looked at me for a long moment. "You've changed," he said. I met his gaze. "No," I replied. I just stopped waiting for someone else to tell me who I am. He nodded slowly, as if he understood exactly what that meant. The next morning, I drove to the town hall to finalize the details. The air smelled like rain, and the clouds hung low over the buildings. The clerk behind the counter smiled when I handed her the form. "Small wedding?" she asked. "Small but important," I said. She laughed gently. "Those are the best kind." Walking back to my car, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: control. Not the loud kind that comes from winning an argument, but the quiet kind that grows from acceptance. It was strange how letting go could feel like holding something stronger. When I got home, Mark had already started rearranging things. The guest list was on the fridge, no more than 10 names. I traced my finger down the list, pausing when I reached the bottom. No father, no sister, just the people who showed up. Mark handed me a cup of coffee and said, "Everyone keeps saying a wedding is about family, but maybe it's about something else." I looked up. "What do you think it's about?" He smiled. "Maybe it's about who stands with you when no one else will." I thought about that all afternoon as I packed the old invitations into a box. Each name felt like a chapter I'd finally finished reading. I didn't hate any of them, not even him. I just didn't want them written into my story anymore. As the evening settled in, Mark and I sat on the porch. The sun dipped low behind the trees, painting everything gold. He reached over, lacing his fingers with mine. "It's your story now," he said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I just let his words sink in. They felt like freedom. The phone rang a little after 8. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said to pick up. The voice on the other end was rough, older. "Jenny?" "Yes," I said carefully. "This is Mr. Avery," he said. "I'm a friend of your father's. He told me something you should know." My heart paused for a moment. "What is it?" I asked. He hesitated. "It's about your mother's inheritance." The line crackled. His voice dropped lower. "He said something years ago that didn't sit right with me. I think it's time you heard it." I gripped the phone tighter, my chest tightening. Why now? There was a long pause before he said, "Because you finally sound ready to hear it." The cafe smelled like burnt coffee and something sweet I couldn't name. I sat near the window, watching the rain smear the glass when he walked in. Mr. Avery, my father's oldest friend. His hair was thinner than I remembered, his shoulders a little smaller, but his eyes still had that steady calm that made people trust him. He spotted me immediately and gave a polite nod before sitting across from me. "You look just like your mother," he said quietly. I smiled, the kind that didn't reach my eyes. People used to say that. Not so much anymore. He hesitated before pulling an envelope from his coat. "Your father probably wouldn't want me showing you this," he said. "But your mother did trust me once, and I think she'd want you to know." My chest tightened as I reached for it. "Know what?" I asked. He didn't answer, just pushed the envelope across the table. It was thick, folded at the corners, like it had been opened and closed too many times. I slid the papers out carefully. Bank statements, transfers, checks, all in my father's handwriting. The amounts were large, tens of thousands. Every withdrawal marked from the account my mother left behind. The account that was supposed to be for both of us. At the bottom of one page, my sister's husband's name appeared next to business loan. The date made my throat close. It was 2 months after my mother died. I looked up. He used her inheritance. My voice barely came out. Mr. Avery nodded. "Every cent. Your mother wanted it split evenly between you and Emily. She trusted him to keep it fair." He said it softly, like it was supposed to land gently. It didn't. It shattered something deep inside me, something I didn't even realize had survived. I felt my hands tremble under the table, so I clasped them together. My father's betrayal wasn't loud or violent. It was quiet, methodical, written in ink, and signed with his name. All those years I'd told myself he didn't show up because he was proud, because maybe he didn't know how to love me right. But now I saw it for what it was. It wasn't pride. It was selfishness dressed as authority. Mr. Avery sighed. I told him it wasn't right. He said Emily needed it more, that you'd understand. My stomach turned. Understand? I said slowly. He stole from me and said I'd understand? Avery's eyes dropped. He's been carrying that guilt for years, Jenny, but he'll never admit it. I stared down at the papers again, the ink bleeding slightly where rain from my coat had touched the edges. He made sure Emily's husband had a chance, I whispered, but when I asked him to walk me down the aisle, he said he was busy. Avery's voice softened. Your mother would have wanted you to know the truth. She told me once that you'd be the one to forgive, but not forget. She said forgiveness doesn't mean blindness. I folded the papers back into the envelope. I don't think forgiveness is the problem, I said. It's respect. That's gone. The waitress passed by, refilling cups, and I realized mine had gone cold. I didn't taste the coffee anyway. My mind was already racing through every memory that had ever felt off. Every gift Emily received, every excuse Dad made, every time he said he was proud of her but quiet with me. It all made sense now. He wasn't distant because he didn't know how to love. He was distant because he'd already chosen who to love more. Mr. Avery cleared his throat. I shouldn't have waited so long to tell you. I met his eyes. Why now? He looked at me for a long moment. Because you finally sound like your mother. That hurt in a strange way, but it also steadied me. I slipped the envelope into my purse. Thank you for telling me, I said. He nodded once, then stood. He'll deny it if you bring it up, he warned. That's who he is now. I gave a small smile. Then maybe he'll get to watch who I'm becoming. He left a few dollars on the table and walked out into the rain. I stayed, watching the droplets slide down the window, each one reflecting a piece of my face. For a moment, I didn't recognize myself. Then I did. The woman looking back wasn't desperate anymore. She was done waiting for apologies. I whispered, almost to the glass, he won't walk me down the aisle. Then he'll watch me walk away from everything. The words felt heavy, but right. Outside, the rain eased into a steady rhythm, and for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt certain. The courthouse smelled like old paper and rain. I stood at the counter, pen in hand, staring at the form that would change everything. Are you sure you want to do this? The clerk asked softly. Her tone wasn't judging. It was the kind people use when they sense something bigger behind a choice. I nodded. Yes, I said. I'm sure. My voice didn't shake. It surprised me a little. The form asked for a reason. I paused for a second, then wrote, personal peace, 2 words that felt heavier than they looked. I slid the paper back to her, and she stamped it without another word. The sound echoed like a door closing somewhere deep inside me. Walking out into the gray afternoon, I whispered my new name under my breath. Jeanette Claire. It didn't feel strange. It felt clean, like something that had been waiting for me all along. My mother's name, the one my father erased when he decided his mattered more. I remember how he used to correct people if they mentioned her side of the family. That's not our name, he'd say, as if mine never belonged to her at all. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Mark, wedding invitations spread out between us. You really want to reprint all of them? He asked. I smiled faintly. Every single one. He exhaled, nodding slowly. You're not doing this to get back at him, right? I met his eyes. No, I'm doing it so I can stop carrying his name every time I introduce myself. He leaned back in his chair. You don't have to explain it to me. I looked down at the invitation in front of me, tracing the new name printed at the bottom in soft gold letters. He gave me nothing, I said quietly, but I can give myself peace. The printer hummed beside me, spitting out each new card. Jeanette Claire. Seeing it in ink felt different than saying it out loud. It wasn't rebellion. It was reclamation. For years, I thought letting go of him meant losing part of who I was. Now I understood it was the opposite. He wasn't part of me. He was the weight I was meant to set down. When the last invitation came out, I placed it aside. One copy, separate from the rest. No address, no return label, just my name, shining faintly in the light. I slipped it into an envelope, sealed it, and wrote nothing on the front. It wasn't a message. It was a mirror. If he chose to open it, he'd see exactly what he left behind. Mark watched me from the doorway. "You're calm," he said, almost surprised. "I thought you'd be angry." I shook my head. I was, but anger's loud. I don't want him to hear me. I want him to notice the silence instead. I mailed the envelope the next morning, no hesitation. I didn't imagine his reaction. I didn't need to. Some truths don't need an audience to exist. They just need air. That evening, I cooked dinner while Mark folded laundry in the next room. The world felt smaller, quieter, but not in a lonely way, in a peaceful one. The name still lingered on my tongue, light and sure. I caught myself smiling when I said it again under my breath. "Janet Claire." The phone rang just after 9. I almost ignored it, but the number was familiar. Too familiar. I answered without a word. His voice came sharp and cold through the line. "You're disrespecting family." I didn't speak at first. I just let the silence hang there. It was strange how easily silence could sound like power. Finally, I said, "You should have thought of that before you sold it." The air between us cracked. I heard his breath catch, then nothing. Just the faint sound of him realizing that this time I wasn't the one waiting to be forgiven. I hung up slowly, feeling the quiet settle around me again. It wasn't revenge. It was release. For once, I didn't need him to understand what I meant. I just needed him to know that I finally did. When I pulled into Uncle Robert's driveway, the gravel crunched like it always did when I was a kid. He was sitting on the porch, mug in hand, eyes soft but sharp like he'd already read what was written on my face. "You look tired, sweetheart," he said. I tried to smile. "I think I finally ran out of pretending." He nodded, setting his mug down. "Come on inside. You always talk better over coffee." His house smelled like cedar and old books. Same armchair, same family photos on the wall. Except none of them had my father in them. Maybe that's why it felt so peaceful. I told him everything. How Dad said he was too busy to walk me down the aisle. How Emily bragged about his money and called me sensitive. How the check came in the mail instead of his presents. And then the truth about the inheritance. How he gave everything my mother left to Emily's husband. Uncle Robert didn't interrupt. He just listened, eyes steady, like he was holding space for all the years no one else had. When I finally stopped, the only sound was the old clock ticking behind him. He leaned forward, resting his hands on his knees. "Then I'll walk you down the aisle, sweetheart." For a second, I couldn't breathe. "You don't have to." He cut me off gently. "I know I don't, but someone should. And it's about damn time it's someone who loves you without conditions." My throat tightened. I tried to speak, but nothing came out. All I could do was nod. Tears came before I even realized I'd let go. But they weren't the kind that burned. They were clean. For once, crying didn't feel like breaking. It felt like clearing space for something better. He smiled softly. "You always had her spirit, you know. Your mom. She didn't take anyone's nonsense, either." I laughed through the tears. She'd probably tell me to stop crying and get on with it. He chuckled. "She would, but she'd also tell you she's proud." We sat there in silence for a while, both of us watching the sunlight drift across the floor. I thought about how many years I spent trying to earn something that was never mine to begin with. Love shouldn't need proof. It should just show up. When I finally spoke again, my voice came out low. "I used to think blood meant something." He looked at me, eyes kind. "Blood just means you're related. Love means you're family." I stared at the photo of my mother on the mantel, her smile calm and sure. Maybe family wasn't about who shared your name or who stood next to you in pictures. Maybe it was about who showed up when your world fell apart and didn't ask for anything in return. "Uncle Robert," I said quietly, "you were the one who came to every recital, every birthday, every broken thing I tried to fix." He shrugged. You were never broken, kid. Just waiting for the wrong people to notice you. That sentence hit me harder than anything my father had ever said. Or maybe because it was the opposite of everything he never did. We talked about the wedding after that. Simple things. Who'd be there, what song I'd walk to. I told him it'd be a small ceremony, mostly friends, and a few faces that never left when things got ugly. He smiled. That sounds perfect. You don't need a crowd, Jeanette. You just need truth. As I drove home, later, his words stayed with me. The road stretched out ahead, golden light filtering through the trees. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was driving away from something. I felt like I was heading toward my life. Maybe family isn't about blood at all. Maybe it's about who stands with you when it matters. What do you think? The morning of the wedding came quiet and pale. My dress hung by the window, the air still and calm. Mark was downstairs talking to the florist, his laughter faint. I looked at myself in the mirror and saw peace where grief used to live. Then, through the window, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A familiar car pulled up slowly outside the venue. My heart froze. It was his, my father's. I heard the car before I saw it. The low, uneven hum of his old sedan rolled over the gravel and stopped just outside the venue gates. For a second, I thought maybe it was another guest. But when I saw him step out, suit too formal, face too proud, it felt like the air around me stiffened. My father, uninvited. He walked straight toward me, as if he still owned the right to. Jenny, he said, his voice clipped and heavy. We need to fix this before you ruin everything. I didn't answer. His words hung there, sharp enough to draw eyes from every direction. A few guests paused near the door, pretending not to listen. I stood still, my bouquet resting loosely in my hand. You shouldn't be here, I said quietly. He ignored me completely. You can't shut me out of your own wedding. I'm still your father. He said it like a claim, not a confession. Behind me, I felt Uncle Robert step closer. His calm was steady, like a wall built from everything I'd ever needed but never had. She's not shutting you out, Tom, he said, voice low but firm. She's just done being interrupted. My father turned toward him, jaw tightening. You stay out of this. This is family business. Robert didn't flinch. That's what you keep calling it. Family. But I don't think you know what that word means anymore. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. My father looked at me, his expression caught somewhere between pride and disbelief. You think changing your name makes you someone new? He asked. You think that fixes what's broken? I met his eyes, steady and calm. No, but it stops it from breaking me. He didn't have a response to that. For once, he was the one without words. Mark stepped out from the side room then, pausing as he saw the tension. Everything all right? He asked gently. I nodded, even though the truth sat thick in my throat. It will be. My father cleared his throat, trying to recover his tone. I'll just take my seat then, he said stiffly. Front row, where I belong. He said it like an order, not an invitation. Guests shifted uncomfortably as he brushed past, his shoes echoing across the hall floor. I watched him walk away. Every step was a reminder of all the times he'd walked away before. But this time, it didn't hollow me out. It only confirmed what I already knew. I didn't need his permission to feel whole. Uncle Robert adjusted his tie, his old military uniform crisp and worn with memory. You ready, kiddo? He asked. I smiled faintly. Yeah, I whispered. I've been ready for a long time. He held out his arm, and I slipped my hand through. His steadiness was like gravity, quiet, grounding, real. No conditions, no pride, just presence. That was what family was supposed to feel like. As the coordinator signaled for us to line up, I took a slow breath. The music began, soft, deliberate, the kind that seems to know how to fill silence without drowning it. Guests turned their heads. The doors opened. From the corner of my eye, I saw him stand. My father, his posture straight, eyes fixed on me, hand half raised like he expected me to walk toward him. For a moment, the entire room froze, waiting to see what I'd do. But I didn't move in his direction. I turned the other way. The collective sound of quiet surprise passed through the crowd like wind. I kept walking, step by step, calm and certain, toward the aisle where Uncle Robert waited. His smile met me halfway. And in that moment, I realized something simple. Peace doesn't always come from forgiveness. Sometimes it comes from finally choosing where not to walk. The room went still when the doors opened. For a moment, no one breathed. My hand rested lightly on Uncle Robert's arm, his sleeve firm beneath my palm, steady as stone. "Ready?" he murmured. I nodded once. "Let's walk." The music began, slow, deliberate, the kind that doesn't rush you. Every step echoed softly, each one heavier than the last. The crowd rose around us, a sea of faces turning toward me, eyes tracing the silence that followed us down the aisle. I didn't look at them. I looked straight ahead, because I knew if I looked left, I'd see him. And I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. Halfway down, curiosity won. I turned. My father sat in the front row, shoulders squared, jaw tight. At first, he looked smug, like he still believed I'd stop and give him some kind of second chance. But as I walked past, his expression cracked, his mouth tightened, his hand shifted in his lap, and for the first time I saw something real flicker behind his eyes. Guilt. It was quiet, but I felt it. The air between us stretched thin. I didn't slow down. I just kept walking. With every step, I felt lighter, like the distance between us wasn't just space, it was freedom. The whispers around the room faded into nothing. All I could hear was the rhythm of my own breathing and the sound of Uncle Robert's steady footsteps beside me. I thought about every time I had begged for approval, every call that went unanswered, every moment I'd swallowed my pride to keep peace. All of it led here, this single walk. And this time, I wasn't walking toward him. I was walking past him. As we reached the altar, Uncle Robert's hand gave mine a gentle squeeze. I could feel the years of quiet protection behind that small gesture, the kind of love that never needed proof. I turned to face Mark. His eyes met mine, soft and sure, like he already understood the storm I'd just walked through. He smiled faintly. "You did it, Jen." His voice was low, barely a whisper, but it filled every corner of my heart. For a second, I forgot anyone else was there. It was just us, two people who had built something from the wreckage. I took his hands, feeling my pulse steady again. The minister began to speak, his words calm and even. But behind me, I heard movement, the scrape of a chair, the rustle of fabric. My father. I didn't turn around, but I could feel it, the weight of his presence shifting, the shame pressing through his silence. It was strange how clear everything felt at that moment. I didn't need to say anything. He finally understood what his absence had cost. As the vows began, I saw Mark's eyes flicker toward the side aisle, then back to me. His face told me everything. My father was leaving. He hadn't even waited for the ceremony to end. My breath caught, but not from pain, from peace. Because this time, I didn't chase him. I let him go. The music played on. My voice stayed steady through the vows, even when the door clicked softly behind him. That sound, his exit, was the quietest gift he'd ever given me. When the words, "You may kiss the bride," came, I smiled, not because of the ritual, but because I knew what it meant. I had walked farther than anyone could see. Each step down that aisle wasn't toward a man, or a future, or a perfect ending. It was toward myself, toward the woman who no longer needed permission to stand tall. After the guests left and the music faded, I walked back into the empty hall. The candles were half burned, the flowers still sweet in the air. My heels clicked softly against the floor as I passed each row of seats. That's when I saw it, a white envelope lying on the front pew where my father had sat. my name written in his handwriting. For a moment, I just stared at it. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to leave it right there and let it rot under the weight of its own silence. But curiosity still lived somewhere deep in me, that small part that once believed he might change. I picked it up. The paper was thick, folded twice. Inside, there was only one line. You always were stronger than I wanted to admit. No apology, no love, just reluctant respect, the kind that comes too late to mean anything. I read it again, slower this time. The words didn't sting. They just confirmed everything. He'd always wanted me small enough to control, quiet enough to keep. And now that I wasn't, all he could offer was acknowledgement, not remorse. I slipped the note back into the envelope and walked outside. The night was cool, still. The moonlight touched the edges of the gravel path as I crossed it toward the garden behind the hall. Mark was still inside with Uncle Robert, laughing softly with the caterer. I didn't tell them where I was going. By the benches, a small metal trash bin sat near the lanterns. I struck a match from the box that had been used for the candles. The flame flickered uncertainly before catching. I held the letter above it for a few seconds, watching the paper curl, the ink darken, the words dissolve into gray. When it was done, I whispered, I don't need his words. And for the first time, I actually believed it. The ashes lifted and scattered into the air, disappearing into the night like they'd never existed. I watched until there was nothing left. The silence around me wasn't empty anymore. It was full of something I couldn't name. Maybe peace, maybe finality. Inside, the music had changed to soft laughter and clinking glasses. I took a deep breath, brushed the soot from my hands, and walked back toward the light. Uncle Robert saw me first. He smiled, a knowing kind of smile that didn't ask questions. All good? He said. I nodded. Better than good. Mark came over, taking my hand gently. You okay? He asked. I am, I said. More than I've been in years. We danced for a while, quietly, away from everyone else. My head rested against his shoulder, and all I could think was how still everything felt inside me. No noise, no ache, just stillness. Later that night, when we got home, I found the faint scent of smoke still on my fingers. It didn't bother me. It reminded me that some endings have to burn to mean anything. I went to bed calm, the kind of calm that doesn't need explanation. The next morning, the phone rang just as sunlight hit the kitchen counter. I almost didn't answer, but the name flashing on the screen stopped me. Emily. I picked it up. Hello? Her voice broke immediately. Jenny. He's gone. Dad's gone. I didn't say anything, just listened to her cry on the other end of the line. Her voice shook through the phone. He's gone, Jen. He drained everything. The house, the savings, the business account, all of it. And Dad co-signed the loans. They're saying he's bankrupt. I didn't speak. I just listened to the same tone I'd heard my whole life. Panic wrapped in entitlement. She kept going faster now. Please, Jen. You've always been the good one. You can fix things. I looked out the window. Morning light hit the trees, calm and golden, untouched by the chaos on the other end of the line. You're the good one, Jen, she said again, softer, almost rehearsed. It was never love in her voice, only the fear of losing comfort. I took a long breath. You'll be fine without me, Emily. You always are. For a second, there was nothing but silence, the kind that finally tells the truth, the way you... It was quiet that morning, still enough to hold the sky. I sat with Mark on the old wooden bench, our hands linked loosely, the air soft with spring. Feels different now, he said. I nodded. It does. The peace wasn't loud. It just settled in, slow and certain, like it had been waiting for me to stop chasing it. Uncle Robert came by later that afternoon with coffee and that same gentle humor that always fills the silence the right way. He asked if I was doing all right, and I smiled. Better than I thought I'd be, I said. He chuckled. That's how healing sneaks up on you, kid. It shows up when you're not looking. I looked out across the water and realized he was right. Peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from letting go of what was never mine to begin with. If my story gave you a bit of strength or peace tonight, thank you for staying with me. Sometimes healing begins by simply sharing what hurt. A few days later, I got a small package in the mail. No note, no return address. Just my father's old cufflinks. The lights were soft, gold against the crystal glassware, the quiet hum of a string quartet echoing through the hall. I stood at the podium, the charity banner behind me, and looked out at the faces waiting. Resilience, I began, isn't about how much you can take. It's about what you choose to release. My voice didn't shake. It carried. When I walked down that aisle months ago, I was led by the man who didn't have to, but did. People turned, smiling at Uncle Robert seated near the front. He just lifted his hand, half embarrassed, half proud. Mark reached over and gave his shoulder a small pat. The applause rose like a wave, gentle but steady. I waited for it to fade before I spoke again. He refused to walk me down the aisle, I said quietly, but the man who did made everyone cry, including me. Sometimes love finds us through the people who were never supposed to stay, yet did, without conditions.